There's a line to a quarry at the end of Thomas's branch. It goes for some distance along the road. Thomas was always very careful to whistle here in case anyone was coming. Early one morning, a large policeman was sitting close to the line. Thomas liked policemen. He had been a great friend of the officer who had just retired. Beep, beep, he whistled. Good morning. Thomas expected that the new officer would be friendly too, but he was sorry to see that he didn't look friendly at all. He was red in the face and very cross. Disgraceful, he spluttered. I didn't sleep a wink last night. It was so quiet, and now engines come whistling suddenly behind me. I'm sorry, sir, said Thomas. I only said good morning. The policeman pointed to Thomas. Where's your cow catcher? He asked. But I don't catch cows, sir. Don't be funny, snapped the policeman. He looked at Thomas's wheels. No side plates either. And he wrote in his notebook. Engines going on public roads must have their wheels covered and a cow catcher in front to protect people and animals from being dragged under the wheels if they stray onto the line. You haven't, so you are dangerous. Rubbish, said Thomas's driver. We've been along here hundreds of times and never had an accident. That makes it worse, the policeman answered. He wrote regular lawbreaker in his book. Thomas puffed sadly away. Sir Topham Hatt was having breakfast. He was eating toast and marmalade. The butler came in.
Excuse me, sir. You're wanted on the telephone.
Bother that telephone, said Sir Topham Hatt. I'm sorry, my dear, he said to his wife. Thomas is in trouble with the police, and I must go at once. At the station, Thomas's driver told Sir Topham Hatt what had happened. Dangerous to the public, indeed. We'll see about that. Sir Topham Hatt spoke to the policeman. But however much he argued with him, it was no good. The law is the law, he said, and we can't change it. Sir Topham Hatt felt exhausted. I'm sorry, driver, he said. It's no use arguing with policemen. We will have to make those cowcatcher things for Thomas, I suppose. Everyone will laugh, sir, said Thomas. They'll say I look like a tram. Sir Topham Hatt stared. Then he laughed. Well done, Thomas. Why didn't I think of it before? We need a tram engine. When I was on my holiday, I met a nice little engine called Toby. He takes freight cars from the farms, but the trucks are taking over most of his work and he needs a change. He has cow catchers and side plates. I'll write to his superintendent at once. A few days later, Toby arrived. That's a good engine, said Sir Topham Hatt. I see you've brought your coach, Henrietta. You don't mind, do you, sir? Asked Toby. The station master wanted to use her as a hen house, and that would never do. No, indeed, said Sir Topham Hatt. We couldn't allow that. Toby made the silly cars behave even better than Thomas did. Hey, you! At first, Thomas was jealous, but he was so pleased when Toby rang his bell and frightened the policeman. They've been firm friends ever since. Edward was getting old. His bearings were worn and he clanked as he puffed along. He was taking empty cattle cars to a market town. The sun shone, birds sang. But Edward was heading for trouble. Come on, he puffed. Oh, oh, screamed the cars. Edward puffed and clanked, the cars rattled and screamed. Some cows were grazing nearby. They were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. As Edward clanked by, they broke through the fence and ran across the line. A coupling was broken and some cars were left behind. Edward felt a jerk, but didn't take much notice. He was used to cattle cars. Bother those cars, he thought. Why can't they come quietly? He was at the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. When Gordon and Henry heard about the accident, they laughed and boasted. See, allowing cows to break your train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Old Toby was cross. You couldn't help it, Edward. They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are. Some days later, Gordon rushed through Edward's station. Boop, boop. Mind the cows. Hurry, hurry, puffed Gordon. Don't make such a fuss. Don't make such a fuss, grumbled his coaches. A long stretch of line lay ahead. In the distance was a bridge. It seemed to Gordon that there was something on the bridge. His driver thought so too. Whoa, Gordon, he said and shut off steam. Whew, said Gordon. It's only a cow. Shoo! Shoo! He moved slowly onto the bridge, but the cow wouldn't shoo. She had lost her calf and felt lonely. Bleh, she said sadly. Everyone tried to send her away, but she wouldn't go. Henry arrived. What's this? A cow? I'll soon settle her. Be off! Be off! Bleh. Henry backed away nervously. I don't want to hurt her. At the next station, Henry's conductor told them about the cow and warned the signalman that the line was blocked. That must be Bluebell, said the porter. Her calf is here, looking for her mother. Percy will take her along. At the bridge, Bluebell was very pleased to see her calf again, and the porter led them away. Not a word. Keep it secret, whispered Gordon and Henry to each other. They felt rather silly, but the story soon spread. Well, 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 chuckled Edward. Two big engines afraid of a cow. Afraid? Rubbish, said Gordon. We didn't want the poor thing to hurt herself by running up against us. We stopped so as not to excite her. You see what I mean, my dear Edward? Yes, Gordon, said Edward. Gordon felt somehow that Edward saw only too well. One day, James had to wait at the station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. Late again! Edward laughed and James fumed away. After James had finished his work, he went back to the yard and puffed onto the turntable. He was still feeling very bad-tempered. Edward is impossible, he grumbled to the others. He clanks about like a lot of old iron, and he is so slow, he makes us wait. Thomas and Percy were indignant. Old iron? Slow? Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day. Really, said James. I should like to see him do it. Next morning, James's driver was suddenly taken ill. He could hardly stand, so the fireman uncoupled James ready for shunting. James was impatient. Suddenly, the signalman shouted. There was James puffing away down the line. All traffic halted, called the signalman. Then he told the fireman what had happened. Two boys were on James's footplate fiddling with the controls. Phew. They tumbled off and ran when James started. The signalman answered the telephone. Yes? He's here. Right. I'll tell him. The inspector's coming at once. He wants a shunter's pole and a coil of wire rope. What for? Wondered the fireman. Search me, but you'd better get them quickly. The fireman was ready when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and the rope. Good man, jump in. We'll catch him, puffed Edward. James was laughing. What a lark, he chuckled to himself. Suddenly, he was going faster and faster. He realized that he had no driver. What shall I do? I can't stop. Help! Help! We're coming, called Edward. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last, he caught up with James. Steady, Edward, called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engines swayed and lurched. At last, got him, he shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. So, the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I'm sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward. That's all right, replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting. A fine piece of work, he said. James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended. Oh, thank you, sir, said Edward. It'll be lovely not to clank.
It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine's blue paint sparkled in the sunshine as he puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. He was feeling very pleased with himself. "Hello, Thomas," whistled Percy. "You look splendid." "Yes, indeed," boasted Thomas. "Blue is the only proper color for an engine." "Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint," said Toby. "I've always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other color either," added Percy. Well, anyway, huffed Thomas, "blue is the only color for a really useful engine. Everyone knows that." Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his trucks full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. "Careful," he warned. "Watch out with those silly trucks." Go on, muttered the truck. "And by the way," went on Thomas, "those buffers don't look very safe to me." The last load poured down. "Help! I'm choking!" cried Thomas. "Get me out!" Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. "Ha ha," chuckled Percy. "You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful." "I'm not disgraceful," choked Thomas. "You did that on purpose. Get me out." It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. "Poor Thomas," whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke, but Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking he had made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy a really useful blue engine like Thomas becoming a disgrace to the Fat Controller's Railway. Next day, Thomas was feeling more cheerful as he watched Percy bring his trucks from the junction. The trucks were heavy and Percy was tired. "Have a drink," said his driver, "then you'll feel better." The water column stood at the end of the siding with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. "Oh!" wailed Percy. "Help!" The buffers were broken and Percy was wheel deep in coal. It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything. "Now Percy has learned his lesson too," he chuckled to himself. That night, the two engines made up their quarrel. "I didn't cause your accident on purpose, Thomas," whispered Percy. "You do know that, don't you?" "Of course," replied Thomas, "and I'm sorry I was cheeky. Your green paint looks splendid again, too. In future, we'll both be more careful of coal." Toby and Henrietta are enjoying their new job on the island of Sodor, but they do look old-fashioned and need new paint. James was very rude whenever he saw them. Ugh, what dirty objects, he would say. At last, Toby lost patience. James, he asked, why are you red? I am a splendid engine, answered James. Ready for anything. You never see my paint dirty. Oh, said Toby innocently, that's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose. James went redder than ever and snorted off. It was such an insult to be reminded of the time a bootlace had been used to mend a hole in his coaches. At the end of the line, James left his coaches and got ready for his next train. It was a slow goods, stopping at every station to pick up and set down trucks. James hated slow goods trains. Dirty trucks from dirty sidings. Blech! Starting with only a few, he picked up more and more trucks at each station till he had a long train. At first, the trucks behaved well, but James bumped them so crossly that they were determined to pay him back. Presently, they approached the top of Gordon's Hill. Heavy goods trains halt here to pin down their brakes. James had had an accident with trucks before and should have remembered this. Wait, James, wait, said the driver, but James wouldn't wait. He was too busy thinking what he would say to Toby when they next met. The truck's chance had come. Hurrah, hurrah, they laughed, and banging their buffers, they pushed him down the hill. On, yelled the trucks. I've got to stop, I've got to stop, groaned James. Through the station they thundered. Disaster lay ahead. Something sticky splashed all over James. He had run into two tar wagons and was black from smoke box to cab. He was more dirty than hurt, but the tar wagons and some trucks were all to pieces. Toby and Percy were sent to help and came as quickly as they could. Look here, Percy, exclaimed Toby. Whatever is that dirty object? That's James, didn't you know? It's James's shape, said Toby. But James is a splendid red engine, and you never see his paint dirty. James pretended he hadn't heard. Toby and Percy cleared away the unhurt trucks and helped James home. The fat controller met them. Well done, Percy and Toby. He turned to James. Fancy letting your trucks run away. I am surprised. You're not fit to be seen. You must be cleaned at once. Toby shall have a new coat of paint. Please, sir, can Henrietta have one too, said Toby. Certainly, Toby. Oh, thank you, sir. She will be pleased. All James could do was watch Toby as he ran off happily with the news. know what? Asked Percy. What? Grunted Gordon. Do you know what? Silly, said Gordon. Of course I don't know what. If you don't tell me what is. The Fat Controller says that the work in the yard is too heavy for me. He's getting a bigger engine to help me. Rubbish, said James. Any engine could do it. If you worked more and chatted less, this yard would be a sweeter, a better, and a happier place. Percy went off to fetch some coaches. That stupid old signal, he thought. He was remembering the time he'd misunderstood a signal and gone backwards instead of forwards. No one listens to me now. They think I'm a silly little engine and order me about. I'll show them, but he didn't know how. By the end of the afternoon, he felt tired and unhappy. He brought some coaches to the station. Hello, Percy, said the Fat Controller. You look tired. Yes, sir, I am, sir. I don't know if I'm standing on my dome or my wheels. You look the right way up to me, laughed the Fat Controller. Cheer up. The new engine is bigger than you and can probably do the work alone. Would you like to help build my new harbor? Thomas and Toby will help. Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The new engine arrived. What's your name? Asked the Fat Controller. Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague. Good. Duck it shall be. Here, Percy, show Duck round. The two engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. James, Gordon, and Henry watched Duck quietly doing his work. He seems a simple sort of engine. We'll have some fun and order him about. Smoke billowed everywhere. Percy was cross. Duck took no notice. They'll get tired of it soon. They tell you to do things, Percy. Yes, they do, answered Percy. Right, said Duck. We'll soon stop that nonsense. You whispered something. We'll do it later. The Fat Controller was looking forward to hot buttered toast for tea at home. Suddenly he heard an extraordinary noise. Whee! Bother, he said, and hurried to the yard. Duck and Percy calmly sat on the points outside the shed, refusing to let the engines in. Gordon, James, and Henry were furious. Stop that noise, bellowed the Fat Controller. They won't let us in, hissed Gordon. Duck explained this behavior. Beg pardon, sir, but I'm a Great Western engine. We do our work without fuss. But begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I would be glad if you would inform these engines that we only take orders from you. Silence! Snapped the Fat Controller. Percy and Duck, I am pleased with your work today, but not with your behavior tonight. You have caused a disturbance. Gordon, Henry, and James sniggered. As for you, thundered the Fat Controller, you've been worse. You made the disturbance. Duck is quite right. This is my railway, and I give the orders. After Percy went away, Duck was left to manage alone. He did so, easily. Percy worked hard at the new harbour. The workmen needed stone for their building. Toby helped, but sometimes the loads of stone were too heavy, and Percy had to fetch them for himself. Sometimes he'd see Thomas. "Well done, Percy. The Fat Control is very pleased with us." An airfield was close by. Percy heard the airplane zooming overhead all day. The noisiest of all was a helicopter. "Stupid thing," said Percy. "Why can't it go and buzz somewhere else?" One day, Percy stopped at the airfield. "Hello," said Percy. "Who are you?" "I'm Harold," said the helicopter. "Who are you?" "I'm Percy. What really great arms you've got." "They're nice arms," said Harold. "I can hover like a bird. Don't you wish you could hover?" "Certainly not. I like my rails, thank you." "I think railways are slow," said Harold. "They're not much use and quite out of date." He whirled his arms and buzzed away. Percy found Toby at the quarry. "I say, Toby, that Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, says I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him." He collected his trucks and started off, still fuming. Soon they heard a familiar buzzing. "Percy," whispered his driver, "there's Harold. He's not far ahead. Let's race him." "Yes, let's," said Percy. Percy pounded along. The truck screamed and swayed. "Well, I'll be a ding-dong-dang," said the driver. There was Harold. The race was on. "Go it, Percy," he yelled. "You're gaining." Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he panted to the trucks. We don't want to," they grumbled. It was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. Fireman shoveled for dear life. "Well done, Percy," shouted the driver. "We're gaining. We're going ahead. Oh, good boy, good boy." A distant signal warned them that the harbor wharf was near. "Beep, beep, beep! Brakes! God, please!" The driver carefully checked the train's headlong speed. They rolled under the main line and halted on the wharf. "Oh dear," groaned Percy. "I'm sure we've lost." The fireman scrambled to the cab roof. We've won, he shouted. "Harold's still hovering. He's looking for a place to land." "Listen, boys," the fireman called. "Here's a song for Percy." Said Harold, "Helicopter to our Percy, you are slow. Your railway is out of date and not much use, you know. But Percy with his stone trucks did the trip in record time, and we beat the helicopter on our old branch line." Percy loved it. "Oh, thank you," he said. He liked the last line best of all, and was a very happy engine.